Here's what's coming today on the Woodworking Network podcast.
Then it's a matter of, hey, I was trying to do something in my shop this weekend and I had trouble getting this particular cut made or, doing that other thing. And one or the other of us will come in, and it's unpredictable when it happens.
Welcome to the 5th season of the Woodworking Network podcast and a new episode. Join us as we explore the business of woodworking, big and small, and what it takes to succeed. I'm Will Sampson. Today's episode is sponsored by FDMC Magazine. My guest is Ralph Bagnall from the Product Development Department at MicroJig, a maker of innovative shop solutions. Among other things, we'll be talking about some new CNC work-holding jigs MicroJig has developed. But first, I want to talk about, are you a complainer or a fixer? We are constantly surrounded by people complaining about things, but very few people who actually come up with ideas to address the complaints. I don't have much patience for the complainers, but I have always been fascinated by people who offer possible solutions. Lean manufacturing enthusiast Paul Akers sums it up with a simple phrase, fix what bugs you. But an awful lot of people would rather keep on complaining than actually trying to make the fix. Of course, some might say it takes no special talent to complain, but it does take talent to solve problems, to innovate, to invent, and to focus on fixing or improving things. It certainly is a talent, but I firmly believe it can be learned, much like playing a musical instrument can be learned. Not everyone who picks up a musical instrument can become a virtuoso, of course, but they still can make some pleasant and entertaining music. In that same way, complainers can become fixers with just a little effort. I think the first step has to be vision. Complainers can see the problem, but they don't want to exert the extra effort to visualize a solution. Once you see the problem, the first step to see an improvement is to ask a lot of what-if questions. What if we did this differently? What if we had a special tool to help? What if we used a different material? What if we could do this faster or slower? That helps to analyze the problem and perhaps to bring potential solutions into view. Next, you have to build your solution, first in your mind, and then in the real world. Lots of times the solution you envision in your mind is not so practical in the real world. That's just an opportunity to try again and refine the solution. Edison made 1,000 unsuccessful attempts before he got a light bulb that worked. Successful invention and innovation is really just piling more fixes on top of failures until there is actually something that works. People talk about the spark of invention, but rather than a spark, it's more like a blacksmith's forge. Metal is heated in the forge until it's hot enough and soft enough to work. Then the blacksmith manipulates the metal with hammer and anvil or other tools before returning the workpiece to the forge for more heat. This process continues through many heats until a satisfactory finished product is accomplished. Accomplished blacksmiths will talk about how few heats it took them to obtain a particular result, but that's really just bragging. It's the finished success that matters more than how fast or slow you got there. I'm all about encouraging people to learn to see like a fixer. Look past the complaint to find the solution. Look past the first fix to find a better fix. Embrace continuous improvement in everything you do. Celebrate the solutions. Before we get to our interview with Ralph Bagnall, let's pause for a word from our sponsor. FDMC Magazine is your vital source of information to improve your woodworking business. Whether it's keeping you apprised of the latest advances in manufacturing, helping you solve your wood technology problems with Gene Wengert, or inspiring you with case histories about successful businesses and best practices, FDMC Magazine is there to be the sharpest business tool in your shop. Learn more and subscribe for free at woodworkingnetwork.com/FDMC. Now let's talk with Ralph Bagnall. Today, my guest is Ralph Bagnall from the Product Development Department at Microjig. Welcome to the Woodworking Network podcast, Ralph.
Thanks, Will. Glad to be here, and we're thrilled that you asked us to come and have a chat with you.
Yeah, I'm real interested, but first let's get a little background. What's your role at Microjig?
Well, my primary role is new product development. So Henry Wang, the founder of the company, is still here and still active. And he's the primary driver behind all of our new ideas and such. But there's a lot that goes into creating a product after you've had the initial idea. There's a lot of refinement that goes on. There's a lot of back and forth. Henry and I work together, having conversations and sometimes arguments about what should be done and what shouldn't be done. And then from there, there's the whole process of finding vendors, figuring out materials, getting the patents done. There's just a ton of work that goes in on the back end, packaging, manual design, instructional stuff, just a ton of stuff after the fact. And my primary role is to take a lot of that off Henry's plate, so he's free to do what he does best, which is conceptualize and come up with the new ideas.
Oh, that's great. Well, we'll get into that a little bit more, but first I kind of wanted to talk about how, Microjig is known for its inventive jigs and fixtures, and I've tried and continue to use a number of them. But most of them in the past have been related to what I'd call conventional woodworking, using things like a table saw or handheld router. But the latest product offering is a collection of tools for work holding on a CNC router. That's a little change. Can you tell us about that?
Well, absolutely. It is a change and it isn't. So if you think about the match fit system, our dovetail clamping system, it is just that. It's a system. So rather than using T-tracks or some other method, any user can cut a dovetail groove, 1/2 inch wide, 14 degree, and we have clamps and hardware that fit into that groove. And so, from there, we started with, the clamps, and then we went on to clamping tables with grids and all sorts of other things. And I've been a CNC guy for many, many years, even before I joined Microjig as a full-time employee. And one of the things I saw almost instantly is the way I make spoil boards for my CNC is I used to use T-slots milled into the spoil board, and the match fit system makes it easier because I can just mill the same dovetail groove into my spoil board. And I was using the hardware to hold down, to make my own clamps and such. And from there, we developed the idea of a true full clamping system for the CNC that works on the match fit system. And it's fully compatible with people who don't have CNCs but are using the match fit system.
Right, so you could use it for like a work table or something like that. And in fact, when I first tried out the CNC tools, I had a match fit board that I had made, previously for use on my table saw, and I just took the runner off of it and screwed it down to the CNC, and we were in business.
Well, yeah, and that's one way to do it. We also, with the CNC kit, pardon me, we include a full set of instructions for making a spoil board for the user's machine. Every machine, every brand is a little different. Every machine has a different bed size. So we show how to figure out exactly what the working envelope of the machine is, and then build a spoil board that's custom made for that machine. And part of that is cutting reference grooves so that even if you don't have the board on exactly square and straight to the machine, when you mill the reference grooves using the machine, then everything is aligned according to the machine's axes, and it becomes very, very accurate. But one of the things that's been lacking in the CNC world, at least as far as these, what I call benchtop CNCs, the hobby type CNC machine, is a universal clamping system. Most of them come with a couple of overhead clamps that hold the part from the top, but that makes it very difficult to do things like planing down a glue up or a slab that you want to make nice and flat so that you can do the next step to it. If you glue up a cutting board, you either need to have a fairly wide planer, or, even if you have one, if the grain of the wood is going in multiple directions, sometimes a planer isn't going to do a good job. And a CNC is ideal for being able to plane that all down. Now, but that also means that, if you think about the router sleds for planing slabs that are available now, several manufacturers make them for handheld routers. Those also have the issue of how do you hold the part from the edges so that the bit is clear across the entire top of whatever you're trying to plane down. And our system has 3 different components that work to hold the parts from the edges. And they do it not just through pressure, but actually the way they're designed, the pressure is pushing down on the part as you apply sideways pressure, which means even if there's a little bit of flex, the flex is going to be down toward the table or the bed rather than up. And we have patents pending on that system right now that look like they'll be granted fairly soon. And so it's a great system that gives you that advantage of being able to hold things from the edge. And I found it useful for sanding parts on a workbench, because again, I can sand the whole top of the part without my clamps being in the way. Handheld with a hand plane. Our edge guides are low profile, and the metal screw that holds it in place is inside the plastic. So I can use my hand plane without having to worry about catching an edge on a piece of steel. If it comes off the end of the board, when I make my full stroke, I don't have to worry about it. And
no, that's great. We ought to probably pause here for a moment, and for those in the audience who might not be familiar, while most of the larger professional grade CNC machines use vacuum pressure for work holding, a huge number of mostly smaller machines don't have vacuum tables or pods or any of those kinds of things, and they have to rely on mechanical hold down. So what this kit does is offer some tools for mechanical hold down, and there are a huge number of different table configurations out there as far as T-tracks and different kinds of spoil boards and all that. How did Microjig develop something that could be relatively universal?
Well, again, my background, I've been doing CNC since the mid-90s, starting in the industry. So I'm very familiar with the vacuum that you refer to. And the thing about vacuum, though, even you can use it on smaller machines if you want to, but vacuum's always about square inches. The bigger the part, the better it holds. Very small parts, especially parts that are oddly shaped, are hard to hold. And so most of these, and vacuum pumps that do that are usually pretty expensive. So I've always looked for a physical clamping solution on the smaller machines, on my benchtop CNCs. And, I've been teaching people to make them for a long time, but all of the clamping pieces that you wanted to use had to be shop built. You had to design and make your own. So when we started using the match fit system on the CNC here at the Microjig shop, we were making clamps and hold downs and holding blocks and different things. But then we came up with, we just decided, look, let's just make the products for our customers so that they can do this. And the first part of it was locating your part is always kind of a tricky deal. So where is the corner or the center of your part when you're setting up on the machine? Every time you clamp a piece in, it's in a different location. So our edge guide part that comes with the kit mounts to the board. It references off the cut edges that we show you how to do, and it's exactly 2 inches wide. So now, once you set that up, you have a known 0 point that you can save in your machine. And if all your programs can be written off that 0 point now. And so every time you use your machine, you don't have to try and find the 0 point for each part. And if you're doing multiple pieces off of different boards, that becomes very useful. Then we have other pieces that hold press parts against those stops or against each other. And again, all of this is low profile, 3/16 of an inch right up against the board. So you can work the top of the piece without encountering any tools without risking your router bits. And then for more traditional holding, for heavy duty milling, we do have a set of 4 what we call U-pads that hold the part from the top down, like a traditional clamp, but they're notched. So when they hold the part, they're holding on the top, but also at the very top of the edge. So what you get is you're not just trying to keep the part in place through friction. You actually have a physical barrier to it moving left, right, front, or forward, or back. And so we've created a system that will cover probably 99% or 95% of the clamping needs for the average woodworker. You know, some high-end people are always going to have to do other things, but this will do 95% of the clamping that I need to do in my shop for sure. And that's kind of how we came up with it. It was a natural kind of extension from the match fit system. We found ourselves taking bits and pieces that we had made for match fit clamping on a workbench and started using it on the CNC. Then we kind of said, well, let's just develop dedicated pieces for the CNC. And now we've come full circle, and those pieces made for the CNC are finding their way back onto the workbench.
Well, that's great. And I really appreciated when I was playing around with them, the low profile feature, and then the material being fairly friendly in case you accidentally hit the clamp, and the repeatability and of getting your home point was definitely excellent. I had manufactured a little jig myself that sort of does what the micro jig does better. And I also really appreciated the one that's designed to apply pressure in the corner and push in toward that home point to lock things in safe and sound, and all. That was a great one too. There are some that are round that operate on a cam system, which I found those worked really nicely too. In fact, I had tried to make some cam lock type ones myself, and I was not real successful with them. They just were not reliable, but these seem to work pretty well. I kind of wanted to delve a little bit more into the creative process that you alluded to at the beginning. Now, it's my understanding that most of the products that Microjig officers have come out of the brilliant mind of the company founder, Henry Wang. Is that still the case? Is there a team at work, or is it Henry's ideas and then you and other folks polish it, or how does it work?
Well, primarily it's Henry. He's been the driving force since day one. He invented the gripper in his own garage, and he's gone on for that. I will say that a lot of the driving force behind the CNC kit has been myself, because I know this area. But again, the match fit system was Henry's. He and I are a team. There's no question about that. But he's definitely the lead, and my role is primarily support, and I do play devil's advocate quite a bit, because I do have 40 years of experience as a professional woodworker. So that's a valuable asset to the team. But generally speaking, yeah, Henry's the driving force. And Henry's attitude, Henry's philosophy, design philosophy, has always been, he doesn't want to make another version of what everybody else is making. And so I don't know if you're familiar with the story, but the gripper, our flagship product, started out because Henry was trying to make a cutting board with thin strips glued together into a pattern. And he found that cutting the thin strips was difficult, dangerous, and he didn't like the results he was getting with burned edges and not flat, not consistent parts. And so he spent a couple of years developing the gripper to allow him to rip narrow strips safely, cleanly, and effectively, so that he could make his spoil board. His cutting board. And that's kind of where it all started. So the philosophy has always been, we're not going to make what everybody else is making. Um, we've talked about, let's say, miter gauges. There is room for improvement there, but there are so many companies making some very good miter gauges on the market already that at that point we're just competing with everybody else, and we're still a relatively small company, so it's harder to compete. So we're always looking for those blue sky kind of ideas. The match fit is certainly one of those. The Fit Finder, which came out recently, is definitely a unique piece. That's kind of where we're always looking, is for doing things that nobody else is doing, or in a way that nobody else is doing it. And in some ways it becomes easier because we have less competition in the market. But part of the problem is that we then have to educate the consumer as to what we're making or what we're selling. So, if you bring out your own version of a miter gauge, you don't have to explain to most woodworkers why they want a miter gauge. They know that. You have to convince them why yours is the best. With something like the Fit Finder or even the CNC kit we're talking about right now, we're explaining to the customer not only why you want this, but why ours is a good deal, a good value, useful, and worth having. So there are advantages and disadvantages to the system, but that's kind of where the design element starts. And then with that overarching structure, then it's a matter of, hey, I was trying to do something in my shop this weekend and I had trouble getting this particular cut made, or, doing that other thing. And one or the other of us will come in, and it's unpredictable when it happens, but, we'll sit down and start talking about that, and then start, from there it's drawing and, talking about it and thinking about it and coming up with ideas, and then we'll make prototypes and test. We have 3D printers, we have a CNC machine, we have a fully equipped shop. So we're always kind of prototyping and doing that sort of thing. And the number of products we get to a certain point that we end up abandoning for any number of reasons is kind of shocking.
Yeah, I was wanting to ask about that, because when you're prototyping and testing a new product, what kinds of things are you looking for, and what kinds of things might lead to rejecting a product idea?
Well, we're always looking for ease of use. We're always looking for simplicity, but more often than not, there's two major things that cause us to abandon an idea. Well, I'll call it three. One is we have a great idea, but it's just not practical. It's not going to work, right? And that's not uncommon. Then the next most logical one is, okay, it's a great idea. We can make this product, but it's not going to be cost effective. We can make this product, but it's going to be too expensive. It's just not going to be practical. One of the things, and I'll just give an idea, the clamping tables, we've shown them at shows. We have several that we've made. Lots and lots of our customers have made, dovetail clamping systems, tables, especially with the legs that rise up and down so you can adjust the height. This is something we would love to bring to market. But by the time we get it all made and shipped to the customer, the cost is just prohibitive. So we're still looking into it, but that's one that, may or may not ever make it to market. And then the third thing is, we've come up with some really great ideas over the years, but you get to a point where it's like, okay, it's a great idea. It would do this one function that is very difficult to do, but that's all it can do. And so it becomes a one-trick pony, and it becomes very difficult to justify the cost and expense to bringing a new product to market if you don't have a clear vision that you're going to sell enough of them to justify the cost. The tooling to make most of our products are injection molded, and the tooling to make that is very expensive. And then on top of that, you've got the whole development process. Writing good manuals and all of that is extremely difficult and time consuming. So
a lot of companies these days just dispense with the manuals.
Yeah, and to be honest, Microjig has a reputation for doing very good manuals and very good instructional materials, and that's something that we believe strongly in. Um, it's not always easy to write clear, compelling instructions that make it easy for customers to get the idea, especially when you're trying to introduce them to something that isn't, another miter gauge that all you have to show them is how yours works. We typically have to instruct them in the entire process of what this product does and how to use it. And again, the Fit Finder is a good example of that. There's a lot of things that you do in woodworking where you'd want to know the halfway point, the half thickness of something, like for a half lap or a bridle joint or that sort of thing. And yeah, you can use digital height gauges, but then you got to do the math and fiddle with it to get exactly the middle distance. With our system, it's all automatic and there's no measuring and marking. So, but it's.
I always thought that was one of the most clever things that Microjig ever came up with. That was really definitely a different animal.
It is, and we have a little bit of an upgrade kit. I'll throw out a little secret here. We got a little bit of an upgrade kit coming for it in September or later this fall. So that'll make it even more useful. But yes, it's a very useful tool because it's not just about finding the halfway point. It's also very useful for transferring dimensions. I don't necessarily need to know what the height of the blade is, but if I want to make a router cut the same height as my saw blade, I can use this tool to transfer that dimension physically without having to bother measuring. And that, one of the things I've learned over the years in woodworking is a lot of times it's better not to measure. It's better to transfer dimensions from, we know what we want the dimension between two legs to be, but by the time you get the legs actually assembled, they may or may not be exactly what you wanted them to be. It's better to transfer the actual dimension that they are rather than, measuring and marking. And so that tool does that very, very well. But again, all of that is stuff that we have to explain to the customer in order to show them the value of the purchase. And so that complicates the marketing side of our business a little bit.
Now with this CNC jig kit, is Microjig looking at more tools for CNC manufacturing, or is this an aberration?
We've got a few things in the pipeline. Right now, the kit is available, the full kit, with all the various pieces. So there's 3 of the edge guides. There's 2 of what we call the ramp clamps. A machinist would know it as a toe clamp. The ring clamp that you mentioned, which is the cam, 2 of those come with it, and 4 of the U-pads, all in a single kit. We also provide nylon screws for bolting your spoil board to your bed. That way, in case you accidentally run one of them over with your bit, you won't break the bit. We include all that in the kit. But again, coming out this fall, we will have all of those components available individually. So if somebody does want to use one component or another, off the CNC, or they want more for their CNC, whatever, we'll have an a la carte option as well. Yes, we are looking at some other stuff. Nothing I can talk about at the moment. Until we get patents in place, we tend not to do that, but or at least patents pending. But there will be more stuff. I don't know about like work holding specifically, but there's lots of area for the CNCs. It's definitely the benchtop CNC is the fastest growing segment of our industry right now, of the hobby woodworking industry. I found the kit very useful for lasers as well as CNCs.
I was going to say that it isn't just hobbyists using the bench tops, and a lot of guys that even have a full size industrial CNC will have a bench top or a smaller unit like a 4x4 or whatever as a dedicated to specialty things like doing logos and special projects, so they don't tie up the full sheet nested base router that's putting out a bunch of cabinet parts.
Yep. And so all of that is part of it. We do have a lot of things are coming out this fall. We've got a number of products that we're planning to release in September, and people should be watching for that. Some of it's very, very interesting stuff. But again, the CNC kit will be coming out, is out. and then the a la carte individual components will be out. But the match fit system that it's all based around really, really does allow you to, or allow the woodworker to kind of make whatever they want to make. Anywhere you want to have a clamp or piece of hardware, a stop block, whatever you need, all you have to do is cut the groove. And I really like it for, auxiliary fences for the table saw, for example. I can have an auxiliary fence on my saw stop that we have here in the microjig shop with a dovetail groove cut in it, so I can put a stop block there. And if I happen to cut through that groove, it's just MDF. I don't have to worry about accidentally triggering the saw stop. And that's always valuable. So, and then I can throw it away when it gets all chewed up, and I don't have to worry about, wasting the aluminum extrusion. So the whole system is very useful. And it is a system that we're working with. Like I said, it's kind of went full circle. We took the system from the more traditional woodworking tools, started using it on the CNC, and now the CNC products we've developed are being transitioned into we're finding uses for them on the more traditional woodworking stuff. The instructional videos and manuals and stuff that we have for the CNC kit do show some of the ideas and opportunities for using this series of parts on other machines and other parts of your shop.
That's great. Well, I'm looking forward to the new arrivals. I always like to keep tabs on what microjig is doing, and it doesn't always apply to our mostly professional audience, but most of the time it does. And I love to see what's coming out of those inventive minds. And thank you today for giving us a little insight in how the stuff comes about and where the ideas come from. And definitely I'll be looking forward to hearing more as time goes on.
Well, we really appreciate, as a company, your invite to come on your podcast, and I certainly appreciate it as an individual. I'm very glad to be here. You and I go way back, and doing things like this together from many years ago. So it was a pleasure to be with you, Will. And feel free to reach out to us anytime you have any questions or need anything from us.
Thanks a lot, Ralph, and good luck in future endeavors.
Thank you.
That's it for today. If you're looking for more of our podcasts, you can find all of them at woodworkingnetwork.com/podcasts and in popular podcast channels. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. Thanks again to today's sponsor, FDMC Magazine. If you have a comment or topic you'd like us to explore, contact me at will.sampson@woodworkingnetwork.com. Thanks for listening.